Welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian, and thank you for logging on. I'm here joined with Tim Masso, and we've got an exciting show tonight. I think I open with that line every single time, and every single time, can't be, I guess, an exciting
It's good.
show.
The same thing happens every time. The camera focuses in, so you're doing something right.
Beautiful. So welcome back. Guys, format of the show is ask questions throughout the course of the show. We're going to show you some great new watches from the vault, some watches that we've had just posted to the site, which are really cool, interesting, unique, and just some fun finds to show you guys. We've got an eclectic mix tonight from classic everyday steel watches to pilots watches, so on and so forth.
Yeah, we've got watches that we think are significant, cool, and offer real value. So that's the theme tonight, the triad. Significant, cool, and real value, each one a different balance of each of the virtues. Let's start with the king of watches, the one that's on your wrist. Let's do some wrist chats.
So awesome. So why don't you go first, because I'm going to take this bad boy off so that you can hold it up to the camera.
Okay, absolutely. I'm always the wrist model or the wrist jockey. I'll be the wrist wrangler this time. So you guys know my Grande Memovox, Master Grande Memovox. 41 millimeters from 2001. It's platinum. It's a perpetual calendar. It's an alarm. It also has a notable hanging bronze gong, so it has a remarkable ring to it. Now that's special because generally when you have a platinum watch with a striker, you wind up with a very deadened sound. Rich and lustrous, but you wind up with a deadened sound. With the hanging bronze gong, you get that beautiful tone, sustain, and ring. The watch has a wonderful combination of a platinum caseback and a full platinum clasp, so even though it's only a 41.5, it feels like it's 44 millimeters in full platinum. This is an awesome watch, a great aesthetic, and a slate blue dial from a bygone era in JLC. These days, if you were to get this watch, you'd be on a white gold clasp, and it'd probably have a display case back worth 30 bucks. Okay.
So I was actually double wristing tonight, one of which is my 5980 in stainless steel, which I've worn on the show quite regularly. The other watch is actually a tad more interesting. So this is one of my more recent acquisitions, and it is a Tag Heuer watch, but actually it's just a Heuer or Heuer, and it is a re-edition of a watch that they made in 1964. So I believe that Tag back in the mid-90s was coming out with quite a few different re-editions. And this particular one was a 1964 piece. It has almost like a coppery salmon dial. It's almost got like a monoblock case with the pump pushers. And I just thought that the watch was absolutely awesome, unique, and just a really cool piece to to find and have.
Yeah, you guys will remember this watch from the episode I did where I suggested alternatives to the Moonwatch, and this was actually one of them. Back in about 1996, you had the Carrera re-editions, and there were the CS3, 110, 111, and 112, of which the 112 right here with the salmon dial was by far the most interesting. Now, what's inside is the Lemania Bausch 1873, which is the same basic movement that you'll find in the Omega Moonwatch. It's the combination of the actual Moonwatch caliber, the rare early Heuer Sol re-edition. Back in the 90s, Tag Heuer had just undergone an IPO in 1996, so they were pushing the Tag Heuer brand heavily. To go with a Tag Heuer Sol standalone dial was quite audacious at the time, and it really predated the vintage re-edition trend of the present day. With the Sunburst salmon dial and the Moonwatch heart and the Carrera case, this is a special watch. And what are we asking for this watch?
I actually purchased the watch.
Oh, cool. Well,
yeah,
Brian, well bought.
Yeah. So, and what I really liked about, I liked the uniqueness of the coppery salmon color. I thought it was a little bit brighter than just a traditional flat salmon. And, I think that they really, paid tribute to the watch in that it's pretty much an exact replica of what the original was. And this happened to have been, a near new old stock example, which I really liked. It was actually part of a larger new, call it new old stock collection of Tag Heuers that we acquired, along with quite a few other pieces from the same edition, different colors, different configurations over the years, some Heuer, some Monacos, which we'll, I'm sure be putting up onto the website sometime soon.
And you can really see how this is new old stock. These lugs are razor sharp. Take a look at the faceting of these lugs. The Carrera has always been about the interplay of lugs and caseband, and these, yes, apologize for the fingerprints, but these are razor sharp. This is really like a time capsule from the IPO era of Tag Heuer in the mid-90s. Plus, how much do you love a chronograph tri-register dial without a date?
Yeah.
For the win.
For the win. So, so that's what I've got on the wrist tonight. And, I'm going to move us right along. Somebody said that, finding the live show is like finding Waldo. Is it difficult to find the live show?
YouTube has a problem. First, they don't notify you when we go live. That's a problem. They know they have it. They're not fixing it. Why? Basically a monopoly. Two, it's not easy to navigate to the live show if you're not used to doing it. There is a little bit of a maze in and around the site itself. I recommend going to like Google and searching, how do I find a live show on YouTube? They will give you better, like you will find a forum with better instructions that some guy wrote at 1 a.m. on the other side of the earth than you'll actually get from YouTube. Just do a Google search. Google will lead you to the answer, but they will not give you the answer. Thanks a lot, YouTube.
Anthony O, hi Tim and Brian. I'm looking at a Louis Munet Metropolis Magic Blue. I want something different. What are your thoughts, and what else would be similar and off the beaten path for 12 to 16K US dollars? Anthony O, you happen to be in luck. I actually just took in a pretty much unworn example of that exact watch, which I think it's perfect. I mean, from all appearance, I don't know if the customer ever really even wore it. So what I'll do is I'm going to put my email in the chat. Shoot me an email, and we can also talk about some other interesting options in that price point.
I would say if you want to consider alternatives to that, just based on the aesthetic, you want to consider things like pre-owned DeWitt. You get a very similar case and dial combination. You want something that looks sensational but doesn't cost a fortune, based on solid mainstream movement running gear. Something like a DeWitt would be appropriate, or something like a Peter Speak Marin Piccadilly case, something with really strong lugs and a bit of an expressive offbeat dial. Those would all kind of fit the bill for what you're looking at, I believe.
And what I actually liked about that watch is that the appearance of the watch has that sort of look similar to other independents and what they're producing now, but costs significantly less than what other independents are charging for a similar look.
That's a fact. I think
it has a similar appearance to Gaultier.
When you go,
you don't think?
I'm not quite sure I would make that comparison.
Like the different levels of the dial.
Oh yeah, in terms of different planes, like a dial that has depth, I would agree with that. I think Gaultier is maybe a little bit more of a mechanical aesthetic.
Well, from the movement perspective, it's not comparable. I'm talking just from the aesthetic of different dial layers and things like that.
But definitely you want to cross shop some of the crazier, I would say, skeleton dial Linda Verdlands. Some of the Spido lights can be quite expressive and rugged. They're also built on tough running gear, and you'll get the same level of low volume exclusivity. A little bit of a different case shape, of course. You're going to get more of a sports watch cushion with Linda Verdland, but I think that should definitely be within your sights. If you like something as offbeat as the Magic Blue from Louis Munet, definitely consider anything that will give you that depth of dial that Brian talked about, and basically you want a tank tough movement inside it, because these are all small brands. You want a serviceable caliber in there.
Exactly. So serviceable, I think, being the key feature there, that that you can take it to another watchmaker and parts are acceptable.
Definitely.
Accessible. So why don't we sort of just start with, should we start with the PAM?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this is a watch that just recently came in. I snagged it from the vault to the chagrin of Jason and Josh, who are actually going to feature it on their show later this week, so I beat them to the punch. So this Panerai here, green dial, titanium case, is actually a Harrods edition that was recently launched. So you've got the primarily all brush finish throughout the case and bracelet, except for the high polished titanium bezel. And this particular watch was done in an example of 100 pieces for Harrods.
Yes. And you can see that it's the signature Harrods green that you'll recognize, well, first of all, from the actual store in London if you've been there, but you'll also notice that it bears a striking similarity to the green featured on the thematically similar Tudor Harrods limited edition, which brings us to, I believe, the underlying theme of this particular piece of product placement on the show. I think we have a broader message other than to spread the word about the 100-piece titanium 693.
Exactly. And, that message is that, there are many different editions that are now being done for retailers. And, I don't want to say that this is a new concept because, let's face it, the brands have always done limited editions for retailers in different markets. But I think what's really important is that it's really now starting to get major press, and that, market blasts are going out, writers are starting to pick it up, and these particular small batch editions for retailers they used to just be a slightly different take on a pre-existing watch, where I really think that the current version of the watch was more often than not better than what the limited edition was. So maybe it was a black dial that they switched to a black dial with yellow subdials, that kind of thing.
And a lot of times the branding was indiscreet. Like you would have
Correct.
the retailer's name or logo on the dial, and it would pretty much ruin it unless you were the family that owned the jeweler, or you were like a best client getting the watch for free as a thank you.
Exactly. And, they would do it on the case back. And, what I think is special about this is that the watch happens to be awesome. And that, it's an example of a watch that was built for really Panerai collectors to then only be purchased from a place. So it was built with the collectors in mind, not necessarily for the specific retailer. And, this is similar to the Altavia that was done for the UAE. I don't know if it was only sold through Sudiki and Sons or if it was for everybody, but they did an Altavia in 100 pieces with almost like a caramel color bezel and colored strap, which happens to have done extraordinarily well. Both watches are actually selling for above the retail price. And again, that's another watch that got great press in the watch space.
And it's such a success that this isn't even the only Panerai Harrods limited edition. There is also the blue full Arabic numeral dial 745. So this is not, let me just be clear, this is not even the only Harrods Panerai. There are two editions of 100, both basically the same watch in titanium with the dial that you recall from the PAM 359. This one has the green, the other one has the blue. I actually prefer this one. I think this is a better look. I also appreciate the availability of this dial on a non-bronzo. We saw a little bit of this last year with the 3 boutique editions with the steel and titanium cases and the green dial. I want to try to get the Harrods inscription on the case back here because this is the only overt branding. That is the only sign to the outside world that this is a Harrods special edition. This is the inverse of what a retailer edition would have looked like back in the 2000s when it was absolutely everywhere and actually ruined the watch. Yeah, and
there was a comment about the bracelet, and it actually comes with an extra strap, and I want to say a deployment buckle. I don't know if it's a deployment or tang, but it comes with an extra couple straps as well, really to change up the bracelet and change the look.
The straps are also color keyed to the dial, and the same is true of the blue dialed 745. It comes with blue straps.
And we have a question from B. Nielsen. How similar is the green to the green of the PAM 911? I don't really think it's that similar. This is almost a darker, more hunter green. The PAM 911. It's like a brighter Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles green.
I've seen them both. I have to be honest, I would have to see them both side by side to make the call.
Yeah.
I saw the 911 in a dimly lit room. By the way, the PAM 911 was the unofficial Angelo Bonatti sign-off, if you're wondering what that was. It was essentially a limited edition for people who were close with the only CEO Panerai has ever known under Richemont since 1997, Angelo Bonatti. So his departure and the 911 go hand in hand. But until we actually have the watches side by side, I'm just going to say they're similar. I can't definitively say they're different. Brian seems to think there's a real distinction and a real contrast. So I'm going to go with that. I think he's probably seen more of the two than I have.
Yeah. So, Francisco, thank you. It is deployant, not deployment.
Yes.
I've only probably been saying it wrong my entire life, but I appreciate the feedback.
Deployant. Yeah, it's the lingua franca of watchmaking. Who would have thought it was French?
But moving right along. So this is another watch that was just came in, and as I'm rummaging around the drawers to sort of see what the new arrivals are, this really caught my eye. I'm going to have Tim here show it. It's a Glashut piece that actually just hit the website. And it is it's a Senator Observer?
It's a Senator Observer.
Senator Observer Perpetual.
Perpetual calendar.
Correct, in 39 millimeters. You've got the aperture there for day of the week, date, month, moon phase, as well as a big date window. What really caught my eye, is that's going to be the indication for the leap year.
Yes.
Right there below Glashut Geneva. And what I really liked about the watch was I thought that it was well proportioned to the size of the case. I actually like the overall layout. I think it's somewhat simple. I love the big double date window. What's the term for how the discs there curve into one another?
I think that you would just say they're superimposed.
Superimposed, which is similar to the way FP Journe does it. I think it's a very rich way of doing it. And for some reason, I'm not a big fan of leap year indications when they're sort of big and big and very much take up a lot of space on the dial. So I really like how small and out of the way that it is, because you pretty much don't really need to know what what cycle it is until it's the final leap year. Price point wise, we have the watch listed on our website for $12,950, which I just think comes complete with box and papers, and I just think that for bang for the buck, it's hard to beat that in a Glashütte in-house perpetual calendar, pilot style. I love the all brush finish. I think it's an unassuming watch that that's got a major engine in it, and it's the kind of watch that you can pop that bracelet off, put a brown calfskin strap on it, and completely change the look.
We're doing our best to get that display case back, guys. It is actually worth looking at. This is the Geo Caliber 3950. It's the Caliber 39 tractor base, automatic winding, 40-hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate. Nicely executed. You can't quite see. I'm trying my best, guys, but there's a black polished swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism, a 3/4 style bridge, and then a skeletonized Glashütte stripe winding mass. This is a handsome watch and a Senator Navigator, 39 millimeters in stainless steel and discreetly sized with a matte black dial. This is a no-nonsense sports watch that nevertheless is equally welcome in dress attire thanks to the vaguely vintage profile of the pot-bellied case. It's an evocative little thing, and you almost wish this is what Georges Kern were doing with the current flight of Breitling pilot-style watches. Something that is quirky, has personality, and yet is so versatile and timeless, it's going to look just as good in 10 years. This is not a brand new model. This dates back to the 2000s, and yet it looks as fresh as anything coming out of Germany today. 39 millimeters is a good size for a pilot-style watch, and I wish we would see more of this from around the industry. I'll also mention that the watch has an incredibly handsome aperture display for the perpetual calendar. I prefer this so immeasurably to radial registers because you can actually read the calendar.
Yeah, exactly, and I love I love the small nature of the watch. I just think it fits incredibly comfortably on the wrist. It's it's unassuming, and look how awesome that is. Exactly as you said, it's a bit of a quirky watch, and it's going to take the right person to buy it. But I just think it's incredibly cool, very wearable. And it's kind of that beater perpetual almost.
And the bracelet adds a lot of value. Let's be honest, guys. If you were to order that bracelet as a standalone accessory for a 10 to 12-year-old Geo, you would be looking, I can't imagine you'd get that bracelet for less than 4 figures. If you wanted to order that thing as an accessory.
No, definitely not.
So to buy the watch on the bracelet offers a lot of value. Plus, down the road, you don't have the strap replacement costs. And I would just say that bracelets are more versatile than they used to be. Maybe they used to have a little bit of a sports watch brutality about them. But after 30-plus years of Rolex being considered an office watch, I think we can definitively say bracelets are welcome in any attire, even when they're steel, even when they're satin finished.
Yeah. So, great watch here nonetheless. What else do we have here? Any questions coming in? It doesn't seem like we have many, so we will keep going.
Let me shamelessly plug 2 things. First, this is the last week for our Bird Vaillet horological sculpture giveaway. There is a link in the description, and you can enter to win a $2,700 retail value, luscious lucite, beautifully hand-finished with reclaimed watch and clock parts, individually selected, ultrasonically cleaned and detailed. Each one of these is constructed from multiple layers of lucite, hand-finished and autoclaved for no fewer than 8 hours. It takes about 3 weeks to make one of these from start to finish, and each one is completed with an engraved sterling silver plaque. They're individually numbered, and each one comes with a wooden display case, which is beautifully manufactured in its own right, a leather travel bag to match, a cleaning cloth, certificate of authenticity, and a little bit of information about how these are made. Straight from Bird Vaillet's atelier in New York City to us and to you. Enter our raffle, participate in our social media, and you can actually wait your chance of winning. So, what does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with a promo, not for Bird Vaillet, but for us. We're going to be selfish for a minute. Friday, Josh, Jason, buying, trading, selling. That's right. We've got a new schedule. Remember, they are on at 5, so be ready. If you don't get that live notification, and I know some of you won't, turn on our website, go to YouTube, go to Watchbox,
Look how good that
open it up.
looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's sharp as hell.
It is sharp as hell. Look how good you look.
Wow, yeah, that's me at my best from about 40 feet away.
Look how tan you look.
They toned me. They did things.
We toned you. We'll add some bulk in there.
We got Justin and Mike. They're experts in video editing and stills.
So yeah, guys, exactly. Please, sign up. The Bird Valle skulls are absolutely awesome, and again, it's for free, so there's no reason not to. Moving along to a couple other pieces on the desk. This is another watch here that I sort of want to just talk about an overall concept that I thought was interesting after the watch came in. So this right here is a 41 millimeter Royal Oak chronograph in stainless steel. We're going to pan in here, and this is with the full blue dial. So as most of you guys know, if you don't know, AP has switched over to new iterations of the dials. The blue dial now has silver subdials. The blue dial with silver subdials is actually available both at retailers and at boutiques. This all blue example was only available at the boutiques, while the silver and black dials were available at retailers and the boutiques. So I know that all sounded jumbled, but I'm sure you guys understand what I'm saying. So why I think this watch is so cool is because when the three were first launched, AP, as far as its value in the secondary market, was not where it is today. And everybody that was asking about the watch or that was looking for the watch that said like, hey, I like the blue dial, can you get it? The response was always, unfortunately we can't. We had the silver and the black, but you can go to the boutique and purchase it from them. And the response was but that's at full retail. And nobody was buying the watch at full retail at the time, which is why, the blue dials really were sort of, undersold in the market. Now with AP being so strong and the chronographs being sold, at retail, whether you're buying it from the boutique or a retailer, the blue dials have surged because now there's no difference between getting, a watch from a retailer or a boutique. And guys are now saying like, oh my God, we want the blue's in. And as a result, AP has really tightened the delivery of those watches and tightened particularly that watch at the very end, which has surged the value of the watches to the point where these are actually now selling over retail.
This is all true, and it's important to remember that they only made that dial between 2012 and, 2016. So a relatively small production window. Take the fact that the vast majority of those were the silver dial, a smaller proportion the black dial, then you've got the blue. So you've got a small number of watches made for a small number of years, and they are so distinctly different than the tone-on-tone silver on blue dials that came after that they are going to have a following all of their own. This is a watch that was hot when it was new, but it's kind of stepped it up to another level. Are we at 5711 levels of hysteria with those just yet?
No, so definitely not. I mean, I think that there's very few watches at, sort of the hysteria of a 5711. I think that there's really no watch right now that's available at that price point that is immediately worth, sort of over what it's worth. The only other comparison I could probably make in terms of a percentage jump difference is the stainless steel Daytona as a percentage of what the retail is.
Yeah. And just to be clear, we've seen, there was an increase in price this year. The 24,000 and change Nautilus went to about 30,000 and change. That's the 5711 in US dollars. Despite that price increase, we're seeing them sell for 50 grand. Have we seen any sell for more?
So I know that the one sold at auction for 60. But from what I've seen, they seem to be floating right at about that low 50s mark. But again, I agree with a lot of the comments in the chat. I do think that this is definitely the best dial color of the watch thus far. I think that it's a watch that there's probably a lot of people that are kicking themselves that they didn't buy it at the time when it was easily accessible at the 17.8. And it's funny, for a few $1,000s, guys were flocking to the black and the silver, and now my response always was like, listen, if you love the blue, just go and buy it at the boutique. Like, why would you not buy a watch, for $1,500 more, whatever it was years and years ago, if you can just get the dial color that you want. So I think a lot of guys probably regret not buying the watch, and I definitely do think that all boats rise, and that the 5711 being where it's at, how difficult it is, and how much over the retail price it's selling for in the secondary market has created increased demand for everything from Royal Oaks to Rolexes to where it's all rising together.
I will say this, guys, the buy for the thinking man who can take 2 steps back, take a breath, and be rational is the third generation VC Overseas pre-owned.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, awesome. You know, under the radar, produced for a short period of time. You know, that bright flat blue I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
You've got the ability to switch it between a strap, bracelet,
And it comes
rubber
with
strap.
them. It
comes with them. And, you know, again, I think that, you know, that was a watch when at the time they were doing everything they could to jumpstart the model.
Yeah.
And they were actually coming out with awesome, you know, with very cool, awesome pieces.
The new reverse Panda is absolutely stunning, and I actually think the brown sunburst is the most unique because it gives the Overseas which may or may not be short for this world. I think we've heard that it might be discontinued. But I think that was the most unique look because that's not a dial you associate with AP. It's not a dial you associate with a Patek and the Nautilus or the Aquanaut. It gave the VC the best chance to be its own thing. That's the one to go out and find. Find the brown dial chrono, put it on your wrist, and never look back. That's an awesome watch.
And, you know, responding to some of the folks in the chat, you know, there's been mention of the chronometric blue from FP Journe. I mean, again, you know, we're obviously biased, but, you know, I tend to agree. I think it's one of the best, you know, blue dial watches on the market. From a price point perspective to the overall quality of the watch, I think it's hard to compare. I mean, tantalum case.
And the scarcity, you're talking, what?
The scarcity, maximum 100 per year, you know, at the rate that they're going. You know, less last year. It's the most expensive and hardest dial for them to produce. I mean, it's a watch by all accounts that should be far more expensive than it is.
And on secondary
but Francois
markets,
Paul is you know, a savage and just keeps the price down there because he wants a watch for people to get into the brand.
And there's an integrity about that too. If you're willing to wait, there's still great stuff to be had at MSRP. We need to be real clear because we are both Govberg and Watchbox. On the Watchbox side, if you see us selling a Daytona above list, you're paying for the convenience of owning it immediately. On the Govberg side, we will always sell the Rolex at list price.
Correct.
We will always sell the Patek at list price. And the consequence there is that you pay list, which is a lot less, but you wait for the supply to catch up with demand. So there's unfortunately a line.
Exactly. So, you know, in all the watches, when we're talking about selling watches in the secondary market, we're referring to, you know, pre-owned watches. So that's the Royal Oak. We've got a couple more watches on the table.
One question just to clarify for Matt Foster, who I believe is asking about the blue dials for the Vacheron. We just want to clarify that blue dial has not been discontinued on the Overseas, nor has the blue dial been discontinued
on the generation that you spoke about, it has.
Yes.
So on the latest generation, the most current version of the watch?
They're not making the blue at all. It's not on the website anymore.
The current version?
Oh, no. We're talking about two different blues.
Yes. So, the current version of the Vacheron Overseas is indeed made with a blue dial, both in the time-only version and in the chronograph version. What we're referring to is the discontinued version of Overseas, the last gen right before the new version of the watch that featured the Big D.
Yeah, we're talking about a very different kind of blue, too, because that second generation watch with the blue dial was like a Rolex Smurf blue.
Correct.
Lacquered, glossy. The new blue is a very ochre sunburst.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. I do watch stuff I do like this Picayune stuff all day. I'm like, hi, welcome to Watchbox and Trust me, after a point, if I don't notice these things, I should take a hike.
Okay, so I'm going to bring a watch that that actually is surging in its own right, you know, on the secondary market, and I actually miss it tremendously, and that is the 116520 Rolex Daytona, the generation before the ceramic. And you know what? I look at this watch and I just get a sense of nostalgia, and I just think to myself, like, how amazing is, you know, this watch was, and how, you know, unassuming it really is next to the new black ceramic piece. And, you know, I think that this is, call it, a much more true homage to, you know, the original, I guess, genes of the brand.
Yeah,
I guess that's a good way of saying it.
You could see that this really does reach back to what the Daytona was, even as far back as the 60s. It's not necessarily the screw downs, which were relatively late to the game after the first models, and it's not the automatic winding, which didn't arrive until '88. It's the look of an all-metal bracelet, case, and bezel. And while ceramic is hot now, that's not where the Daytona's roots lie, and I think that's what Brian's saying. This watch would probably be more recognizable to a 1963 Daytona buyer than that ceramic watch, and ceramic bezels are a thing today. 50 years from now, I think you've got just as good a chance of this watch being the one that collectors seek out.
Yeah. No, and you know what? I think that this happens to be one of my, I shouldn't say one of my favorite iterations of the watch. I particularly like this styling. My personal preference, a little bit better than, the new black ceramic bezel piece. I like the look of it better on my own wrist. And I just think it's a little bit more classic.
I also think it has more wrist presence. The thing about a ceramic bezel is that it really constrains the dial. There's maybe in the black ceramic version with the black dial, there's a bit of extension, but when you've got a light colored dial and a case and bezel and bracelet that all match of a similar light coloration, the watch appears broad and stanced across the wrist, whereas when you have that black ceramic bezel around a white dial, it really does constrain, confine, and bound the dial, limiting the perceived size and presence of the wrist of the watch on the wrist.
Steve Bowden, has that Rolex Daytona been polished? I can't answer that question offhand.
I could take a look and tell you.
My guess is that the bracelet has probably been touched up. We prefer to avoid polishing cases. Again, we know that most collectors, prefer to have the watches, unpolished. So, hard to say. Chances are, we wouldn't have polished the case. Maybe it had been done in the past. I don't know. Bracelets, we do sometimes touch up.
Yeah, I'll also say this, guys. The number one thing to look for with a pre-owned Daytona of late model construction, I'm not talking manual winds, I'm not talking true vintage stuff, since 1988, you want to look at the bezels, because the ones that have either been poorly refinished or worn hard will feature a dearth of lacquer in the fills of the bezel. Before they were ceramic, they were metal. And before it was a platinum deposit in ceramic, it was lacquer in a bezel well. So that's what you want to look for. That, along with the creases of the case, where it transitions from the hoods of the lugs to the flank of the case. If you can see a sharp crease, and you can see that the lugs are of even width, and you can see that all the original lacquer is still in the bezel, as this one is, those are generally your calling cards of a minimally refinished Rolex Daytona, 88 to 2015.
Yeah, this is actually a watch that I regret not buying one and putting away. I had had the the Zenith already, and I thought it was a duplication of efforts. But again, I happen to love the watch, and while I prefer the sort of the black outer rings of the Zenith piece, just still coming back to this, it's just every time I look at it, I think to myself, I can't believe it's not a part of the current collection any longer.
Yeah, and this is actually an M serial number with the first generation clasp, so this must have been one of the last of the first gen clasps.
Yeah.
Cool. Rolex heritage happening in real time before your eyes.
So we're going to keep the questions coming, guys. Final watch that's on the table. I got to give IWC some love. I really think that they've been producing some awesome things. The Pilots watches are on the rise again. I feel like with so much sort of market dominance by Rolex and AP and some of these and some of the other brands, you haven't seen as much coming from the IWCs of the world, but you know what? It's actually been doing awesome. The Pilots watches are selling again, and it made me think when I saw this in the drawer, just how iconic the Big Pilot is, and this particularly this 5002. So this is the first iteration of the watch produced in 1992, Tim?
A little bit later than that. You're pretty close, 2002 to 2005.
Wrong decade.
It's okay, you were thinking the right thing. This is a watch that was a very faithful recreation of the reference 341 of the World War II era. Yes, originally a Luftwaffe watch that was absolutely enormous, 55 millimeters. The 46 millimeter Big Pilot was nevertheless crazy for 2002. Now it featured IWC's modern reference 5000 automatic caliber, which at over 37 millimeters in diameter is actually bigger by itself than a typical Rolex Datejust. I'm going to wind it up because you really need to see the big slow beat of this seconds hand. 7-day power reserve, a big slow beating 18,000 vibration per hour balance in the original version of this watch. A couple of things set this one apart. Of course, you can see it has that parapodia quality about the index at 12. That is to say, it looks like a human face. You also have the numeral 9. Let me get as close as I can. The numeral 9 at 9 o'clock. The railroad style. Oops, my camera guys are telling me back up. The railroad style power reserve scale. And you'll note significantly the original pre-Probus fish crown. If I can get that there, you can see it well. Of course, the Grossflieger, 46 millimeters in stainless steel. I cannot overemphasize, you're going to tell me to move it back again. I cannot overemphasize how ambitious this was back when it came out. And the only real flaw in this particular model is that it had such a short run from 2002 to 2005 that the supply really never met the demand, which is why recent versions of the 5009 have actually gone back to emulating this dial layout.
Yeah, and this is my favorite layout of the dial. I also particularly like the layout of the power reserve indication. I just think it has that ultra classic pilot's feel to the watch. You can see here, this particular watch really hasn't been polished or touched. And what's special about having the fish on the crown is that when these watches are sent in for service, very often they replace the crown on the watch because one of the quirks of this watch was that I want to say that there was a issue with the winding stem, and that but because the winding stem is attached to the crown, they have to replace the entire unit. So a lot of these watches that have gone in for service have had that crown replaced, and the current version of that crown does not have the fish on it. So if you're a collector looking for a 5002, something that you should look for is to see if the watch has that fish on the crown.
I'll also say this. The only flaw is that the stem tube that was associated with that crown was not terribly water resistant. But then again, with a strap like this, are you really going to take this thing swimming? It's a Flieger, not a... it's not a GST, it's not an aqua timer, it's certainly not a deep 1, 2, or 3. This is one to keep high and dry because this is a certifiable collectible. I will say though, all in stainless steel with a 7-day power reserve and an automatic movement, if you've got the wrist for it, this 46 millimeter watch is a very practical and durable daily
I'm
companion.
convinced that thing's big on everybody.
The original watch was 55 millimeters. They scaled it down to 46. It's big as the look.
Yeah, again, there's very few people that I see wearing a big pilot that where sometimes a bigger guy wears a watch and it's like the 44 on him looks like the way that like a 42 looks on me, but I think that looks big on everybody that wears it.
Yeah, okay, so basically you've got this. The guy who played the Mountain on Game of Thrones, Dwayne Johnson, and most professional football players. All the rest of us, the watch is going to look big, so like the big look. It's historically true, and if bigger is better, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah. So that's all the watches that we have on the table.
Okay, guys, we are done.
Yeah. So tonight's show went by pretty quick.
Fishy findings with IWC and assorted special editions.
Enter to win our Birdvae horological sculpture.
Guys, thank you so much for logging onto the show tonight. Again, my email, I put it into the chat. I don't know if they're able to throw it up one last time. If you guys have any questions about any of the watches that you saw, just want to chat watches in general, please, would love feedback. Would also love ideas to talk about on the show. Again, I ask every single show, but really, we put all this on for you. And if there's topics or things that you guys want to discuss, let us know in advance because we can prep with watches, we can prep with imagery, material. So, again, we really appreciate the feedback and the thoughts.
Email Brian if you see something cool on our website, or I make a video that's not of a watch on the website.
Yeah.
Let him know. We can find that watch and we can bring it here. Close the loop, give us some feedback, and we can actually serve you better. I will say this, and this is a little bit of a mic drop moment. The problem is my mic is the size of a postage stamp. 5 p.m. this Friday, Josh and Jason, new show. Be there.
Beautiful. Well, my name is Brian. This is Tim.
I'm Tim.
This is The Watch Insider, and thank you guys for logging on.